So welcome to this week's Optimum Health Clinic Facebook Live. And as you can see, I'm not in the usual place. And that's because my office at home is being redecorated. Although I seem to found myself directly under the flight path for Donald Trump and his entourage. There's like never-ending helicopters and planes going over. So hopefully you can hear okay. And apologies for the rescheduling from last night, as no doubt anyone that lives in this country knows, England were playing in the World Cup semi-final, and I figured that me doing a Facebook Live was probably not a worthwhile competitor of people's attention. So, because I was delayed, I thought I would reschedule for this evening. But interestingly, the football, there's a lot that can be said about the football, but I think the thing that was interesting was someone emailed me, Stuart emailed me and suggested doing a session talking about the role of mindset, because one of the things that's been fascinating with England's performance was, well, partly how different it's been, but also the building of a cohesive team and their attitude and mindset, and how that has been different to previous the last 25, 28 years, certainly most of my adult life, where it's been a fairly disappointing experience. And what strikes me is that mindset is something which obviously becomes obvious in football when you see a change in performance and results of a team like that. But mindset is obviously also crucial on the path to recovery from ME/CFS and fibromyalgia. In fact, one of the things I was thinking when I was putting together some notes on this was that, in a sense, you are, whether you like it or not, you are forced to put together a certain mindset, because whether you like it or not, you have to find the way to get through each day, each week, each month, and ultimately sometimes even years after year. And that mindset that you develop, of course, has great potential beyond life with ME/CFS fibromyalgia. Interestingly, though, on one hand, I would say we're forced to develop that mindset, but also it's the developing of that mindset which often is what supports and accelerates the path of recovery. It's almost like the more skillful we get at navigating the bumps, the challenges, the difficulties, the less they tend to knock us off path, the less we find ourselves in situations where we realize that in hindsight that the way that we've been approaching something has been making it consistently worse. And so I was thinking about what are some of the elements of mindset that I've observed in people that either have been particularly skillful in terms of how they've been navigating their own recovery path, and also just people in life that seem to have navigated challenges or difficulties in their life, again, in a way which seems to have been elegant and in a way which seems to have helped them be successful in ways where perhaps other people might not have been. And this is not a definitive list, and because I haven't got my laptop, I've got them on my wife's phone, which I keep getting logged out of. So the first thing that I think is pretty obvious, and I think it's one of the things which it's certainly been different in terms of the mindset of observing the England football team, is this sense of a positive can-do attitude. And I don't mean positivity in the sense where there's a sense of being kind of ungroundedly kind of Pollyanna, that everything's great and everything's wonderful and we're going to win, it's going to be amazing, but a kind of just sense of can-do, positive, problem-solving attitude. And I certainly remember on my path to recovery that for the first couple of years, I very much had this mindset of this is happening to me, this is unfair, this is wholly bad, I am a victim of this experience, and I am entirely dependent upon something outside of me being responsible for changing this experience. I then had a conversation with my uncle, and I won't go into the whole story now because it's covered in my book and it's told in various places, but a conversation that ultimately helped me realize that if I wanted the circumstances of my life to change, then I would have to be the one to change them. That my approach, my attitude, my mindset was going to be crucial to things being different. And cultivating that kind of attitude is not something that happens overnight. In fact, cultivating that attitude is often something that comes from ongoingly tackling challenge and adversity and finding a way to develop resilience against that. In fact, it was interesting watching the pundits last night after England got knocked out, because one of the comments that was made several times was actually they need this. They need this experience of being at this high stakes and losing and having to recover and come back, and that's what drives experience. That's what drives maturity, and that's what drives the ability that when you're in a situation, for example, where you're 1-0 up, things are going well, they're looking good, and suddenly you concede a goal and you're on the back foot, how do you respond to that? That to me seems pretty similar, the feeling like you've made some really good progress on the recovery path, and maybe you had a breakthrough and you're in uncharted territory, and then suddenly something goes pear-shaped, you have a reaction to something, you overdo it, you have a crash, and then how do you respond? What happens at that point? The more times you have to live that experience, hopefully, if you cultivate the right mindset, if you respond to it as a chance to grow, then you get better at responding to those experiences. Another thing I think is really interesting around positive mindset, actually, it seems quite a topical Facebook Live, because I was watching again, like most people following the football, also following the story of the boys trapped in the cave in Thailand. And that again, I'm sure as more stories come out, it's going to be a fascinating source of learning and wisdom. Of course, one of the things that's starting to get out in the media is that the boys' coach spent many years as a Buddhist monk, and he was training the boys in meditation, and that helped them, I think, manage that experience. But there was a psychologist talking on the news a couple of nights ago, and he was talking. The question from the news anchor was, what's likely to be the impact on these boys? Like, they're going to physically recover, but psychologically, what is likely to be the impact? And he was saying, well, statistically, probably 3 out of 10 of the boys will have some kind of ongoing depression, anxiety to deal with, and if they're well spotted and well supported, doesn't have to ultimately ruin their lives, but they'll need some attention and care, and that sounds quite plausible. But what also struck me, and in fact, I published co-authored a research paper on this a bunch of years ago, that it's true, post-traumatic stress happens, but also post-traumatic growth happens. And in fact, the research I published was interviewing 10 people that had ME/CFS fibromyalgia, and the impact on their identity, their beliefs, their perception of the world. It was actually my undergraduate research thesis when I was at university, and then about a decade or so later it was finally kind of reanalyzed and published. But what was also found, there were, of those I interviewed, I think 3 recovered, 3 recovering, and 3 or 4 less so. The 3 that had recovered all reported a sense of growth. And then there's this kind of this emerging concept in research around the idea of post-traumatic growth. I've just realised that I think my youngest daughter is looking at me in the garden and wondering why I'm not hanging her upside down to put her to bed, but I guess that'll come later. I also think that there's the potential when we go through very difficult experiences to experience post-traumatic growth, and it's easy to focus on the negative and the difficulties and the things where there can be trauma, and sure, it's a traumatic experience having ME/CFS, fibromyalgia, but there's also growth. And if I look at who I am and I look at my life on the other side, whatever it is now, 15, 16 years later, so many of the amazing things that have happened in my life have happened because of the growth that came from those incredibly difficult life experiences. It's like I was forced over 7 years to cultivate a mindset, an attitude, an approach to life which never would have happened if I hadn't been through that experience. And of course, hearing that when you're in the experience is not always what you want to hear, because you don't want to be in the experience. But that's also kind of the irony, that when you're in something that's that difficult, that you don't want to be in, because of that, you're forced to grow. Just going back to my notes. There's a lot more here than I'm going to have time to say in the time that's left. you know what? I think I might save some of this for another day. But I think what I would say now is just something around determination. That again, determination is a muscle. Like any muscle that gets stronger, the more that you work it out. The more, and it's not, I don't mean in terms of pushing yourself physically. Sometimes the biggest challenge to that muscle is the fact, sorry, I have a daughter doing cartwheels right in front of me. Do you want to come and say hello? No one will be able to, you won't be able to hear them. Do you want to say your name?
My name is Marley.
And what day is it today?
My birthday.
How old are you?
7.
And what are you doing?
Gymnastics on a board that I got from my mum and dad.
Do you want to, oh hang on, I'm not actually showing you in the video, there you are. Do you want to try and do a cartwheel on camera? And then I have to go back to my video. Hang on a second, let me see if I got you in shot. You did it! Well done! Okay, let me finish my video and I'll come put you to bed, okay? That's what you get from trying to do a Facebook Live in the garden. Yeah. Of course she's gone now. She's been waiting for the last 10 minutes to try and get a chance to do that. So it's, determination is a muscle, and like any muscle, you grow it by using it. Mindset is something that you get through practice, and whether you like it or not, the experience you're having right now is probably the greatest opportunity you will have in your life to develop muscles and potential emotionally in a way that can serve you in unbelievable ways in life during and beyond the experience you're having. Just like those boys in the cave in Thailand, just like the England football team, fundamentally having a different experience by them having been coached and supported in developing a different potential mindset. So I hope that's been useful. I will be back next week, and then I'm on holiday the week after. But share your comments, share your experiences, share your thoughts around mindset, perhaps things that have helped you shape mindset. That's really what I wanted to get more into, that I kind of ran out of time for, with some of the things that can actively help you do that. But if that seems useful, maybe we can touch on that next week. Bye-bye for now.